My name is Alberta, but most people call me Birdie. I'm 54 years old, and for 30 years, I built my life around two things: my family and the silent belief that I was the foundation of my husband's world. The heirloom on my right hand, a simple gold band my grandmother wore, was a reminder of that quiet strength. It wasn't flashy, just like the role I played. I polished the image, I managed the unseen gears, and I watched James, my husband, shine in the spotlight he loved so much. I was content in the shadows, or so I told myself, until the night our son's 30th birthday dinner erupted and a 28-year-old woman with champagne in her hand decided to make her move, thinking the queen was already off the board. She had no idea she was just pushing me to make mine. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where in the world you're listening from today. Take just a second. Put your city or state in the comments below. I read them all. And if you've ever felt the ground just vanish from under your feet, you might understand why I did what I did next. If you want to hear how a quiet woman can change the entire game with one move, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This story isn't about her pregnancy announcement. It's about what I announced right after. The dining room table was a long, glossy lake of mahogany, set with my mother's china and flickering candlelight. It was Lucas's 30th, and our whole family was there. My sister Eleanor, sharp and elegant as always, our father Robert, stoic at the head, James's parents beaming with pride for their grandson, and James, my husband of 32 years, at the other end holding court with a story about a recent business triumph. I was moving between the kitchen and the table, the perpetual conductor of this domestic symphony, ensuring the wine flowed and the roast was carved just right. And then there was Chloe, James's executive assistant. She was there because, as James had put it with a casual wave of his hand, she's got no family in the city, Birdie. Would be cruel to leave her alone. I'd smiled the good wife and said, of course. Now, watching her lean into his space to laugh at his joke, her hand brushing his forearm, I felt a familiar cold trickle in my stomach. I'd seen the receipts for the jewelry I never received, caught the scent of her cloying perfume on his collar, noticed the late nights that stretched into mornings. I had chosen for years to believe the excuses, the stress of the company, the demanding clients, my own quiet fear of what confronting it would unravel. The toasts began. Lucas, our brilliant, kind-hearted son, thanked everyone. James stood expansive, praising Lucas while somehow weaving in the meteoric rise of Jameson and Company. I kept my smile plastered on my eyes on the delicate rose pattern of my plate. Then, as the laughter from James's toast subsided, Chloe cleared her throat. She stood up, her champagne flute trembling slightly. I know this is Lucas's night, she began, her voice saccharine sweet. But I have a piece of joy I just can't keep inside any longer. I wanted to share it with all of you because you feel like family to me already. She turned her doe eyes to James, who had gone very still. James and we're expecting a baby. We're in love. And we believe this is a beautiful new beginning for both of us. The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in a water glass. Every face at the table froze in a mask of shock, then swiveled toward me. I saw it all in slow motion, my mother-in-law's hand flying to her mouth, my father's eyes narrowing into steely slits, Lucas's look of horrified betrayal. Chloe looked directly at me, and in her eyes was not apology, but a glittering, triumphant pity. She thought she had won. She thought I was just the old wife, the background fixture about to crumble into a weeping, humiliated mess. But a strange thing happened. The cold trickle in my stomach solidified into a block of pure, clear ice. All the doubts, the overlooked signs, the lonely nights, they snapped into a perfect, devastating picture. This wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. The final piece of a puzzle I'd been too afraid to complete. My gaze fell to my grandmother's gold band on my right hand. It felt suddenly not like a relic of patience, but a token of endurance waiting to be used. I set my napkin neatly beside my plate. The room held its breath. I looked from Chloe's triumphant face to James's ashen one, and I stood up. Congratulations, Chloe. James. My voice came out steady, unnervingly calm. It wasn't the screech or sob they all expected. It was the tone I used to address a quarterly board meeting. The silence grew heavier, if that was possible. James finally found his voice. Bertie, for God's sake, let's discuss this privately. You're upset. I am not upset, James. I am clarifying. Since we are sharing life-altering news tonight, I seem to have one of my own. It concerns the true ownership and governance structure of Jameson and Company. I turned to my sister. Eleanor, Dad, I think it's time. James pushed back from the table, his chair scraping violently. This is insanity. This is my company. You can't just... Eleanor was already on her feet, the lawyer in her taking over. She reached for her professional leather portfolio beside her chair. James, you will sit down and be quiet, or I will have you removed from this house for causing a disturbance. My client has the floor. Your client? James sputtered, his face mottling with rage and panic. What is this? Eleanor ignored him, handing me a sealed envelope. I took it, my fingers steady. The paper felt like history. I looked around the table at my family, my son's confused pain, my father's grim approval. I began to speak not to James or Chloe, but to the room. 33 years ago, James had a vision. He was charismatic, driven, brilliant with people. But a vision needs capital. It needs a foundation. My father, Robert, after reviewing the business plan I helped James write, agreed to provide the seed funding, a $2 million loan. But he is and was a pragmatic businessman. His condition was that the controlling interest in the entity, 51% of the voting shares, be held in a silent trust, my trust, to protect his investment and to ensure the company had an anchor of financial prudence. James agreed. He signed the papers. He was to be the face, the CEO, the rainmaker. And I was to be the silent partner, the check on his more extravagant impulses. Chloe let out a small, confused sound. What does that mean? It means, I continued, my eyes locking with James's, that Jameson and Company has never been James's company to give away, to leverage, or to use as his personal piggy bank. It has always been mine. He runs it at my pleasure. Or, as of this moment, he does not. Eleanor, with practiced ease, slid copies of the executed shareholder agreement and the silent trust documents down the table. The notary seals were prominent. The signatures were unmistakable. James's own youthful scrawl was there next to my father's, next to mine. James stared at the papers as if they were snakes. That was a formality, a technicality. You never did anything. I built that company with my blood and sweat. You built it on my family's money, James. And I did do something. For years, I reviewed every significant financial statement Eleanor brought me. I approved major capital expenditures. I said no to the bad deals. I watched while you hired her. I said nothing when you promoted her, and I tracked the exorbitant bonuses and consulting fees you funneled to her department. I have every statement, every transfer. I was silent because I was honoring a partnership you forgot existed the minute you got your name on the door. I picked up my copy of the agreement. Clause 8.1. The majority shareholder, that's me, retains sole authority to hire and terminate the chief executive officer. Clause 12.4. Any attempt to dilute shares or transfer assets without majority consent is void. I looked up from the paper. James Jameson, your employment as CEO of Jameson and Company is terminated effective immediately. And Chloe, your position as executive assistant, and indeed any position within the company, is also eliminated. Security will escort you both from the premises tomorrow to collect your personal effects. The locks on the executive floor will be changed tonight. I did not wait for a response. I placed the document back on the table, turned, and walked out of the dining room. The last thing I heard was a choked sob from James's mother and the start of a furious, sputtering rant from James that was cut short by Eleanor's cool, legal voice. I walked down the hall to James's study, my sanctuary in name only, closed the door, and leaned against it. The trembling started, then a violent quaking that began in my knees and raced up through my core. I slid to the floor, wrapped my arms around myself, and stared into the dark, empty fireplace. The game was on, and for the first time in 3 decades, I was playing for myself. The next few hours were a blur of quiet, efficient action. Eleanor and my father joined me in the study. Dad placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. I always knew this day might come, Bertie. I'm sorry it did, but I'm proud of you. We made a list. Eleanor, as general counsel for the holding company that controlled my shares, got on the phone. She called the chairman of the board, an old friend of my father's, and apprised him of the situation. She called the head of human resources and the chief of security, reading from a prepared script we drafted together. James's corporate email and system access were revoked before midnight. Notifications were prepared for the bank and the company's auditors. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. James. Call after call, text after text. The messages evolved from furious threats. You'll regret this. I'll fight you in every court, to desperate pleading. Bertie, please, we can work this out. Think of the scandal. I didn't read them all. I handed the phone to Eleanor. You are to communicate only through my attorney. Now. She texted back from her own phone. Any further direct contact will be documented as harassment. Around 2 a.m, there was a soft knock. Lucas stood in the doorway, his face drawn. Mom, can we talk? We sat in the quiet kitchen. I made us both tea, my hands finally steady. He was hurting, confused. He loved his father despite everything. How could you keep this a secret? He asked, not accusingly, but with deep sorrow. It wasn't a secret to hurt anyone, Lucas. It was a safety net. For the company, for our family's future. I truly believed that by giving him the spotlight, by letting him feel like the sole creator, I was supporting his dream. I was protecting his ego. I didn't see it as hiding my power. I saw it as an act of love. I was wrong. Love shouldn't make you disappear. I showed him the files, the financial reports I'd annotated over the years, the memos questioning extravagant marketing budgets, the notes on Chloe's rapid, unexplained salary increases and her department's swollen expenses. I showed him the original business plan in my handwriting with James's flamboyant edits in the margins. Lucas's eyes widened as he began to see the full scope, the years of quiet work his father had taken credit for, the financial liberties he'd taken. He's my dad, he whispered, but what he did to you, and with her here in our home? He looked at me, his eyes wet. What do you need me to do? Just be my son. That's all I've ever needed. His understanding was a balm, the first real comfort of the night. By dawn, we had a plan for the public face of the crisis. Eleanor drafted a terse 2-sentence press release. Mrs. Alberta Jameson, majority shareholder of Jameson & Company, has terminated the employment of Mr. James Jameson as Chief Executive Officer due to irreconcilable differences regarding corporate governance and fiduciary conduct. Mrs. Jameson will assume the role of interim CEO effective immediately. It was a nuclear option designed to shock the market, but establish control. After everyone left, the house was terrifyingly quiet. I wandered into the grand living room, all tasteful neutrals and perfect pillows, a stage set for a life that no longer existed. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the decades of compromised self, the enormous responsibility I had just claimed, crashed down. I sank onto the cold marble hearth and cried. Not for James the man, but for the dream of us, for the young woman who believed her silent support was enough. The tears were hot and angry and then finally exhausted. When they stopped, I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my grandmother's ring cool against my skin. Tomorrow, I would walk into that tower, not as a visitor, not as the CEO's wife, but as the owner. The fear was still there, but beneath it, humming like a live wire, was a thread of pure, undiluted determination. I chose a navy blue Valentino suit I'd bought for a charity gala and never worn. It was severe, elegant, and it felt like armor. My driver, Carlos, who had been with the company for 20 years, opened the car door for me with his usual kind smile. Good morning, Mrs. Jameson. The usual, ma'am. Not today, Carlos. Today we're going to the executive entrance. He met my eyes in the rearview mirror, a flicker of understanding in his, and simply nodded. Good. The lobby of the Jameson Tower was a monument to James's taste, glass chrome, a massive obtrusive sculpture in the center. Employees milling about the coffee cart did a double take. Whispers trailed me to the private elevator. The doors closed on the familiar ascent, but when they opened on the penthouse floor, everything felt alien. The receptionist, a young man named Mark, gaped at me. Mrs. J. Good morning. Good morning, Mark. Please call an all-hands meeting in the main conference room for 10 a.m. and send for Ian from security to meet me at my office. I walked past him down the hall to the corner office. James's office. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. It smelled of his cologne and stale ambition. Photos of him with politicians, with celebrities. Trophies. A gaudy modern art piece he'd spent a fortune on. It felt like a stranger's lair. Ian, the head of security, a solid, serious man, appeared at the door. Ma'am, this office is to be cleared of all personal effects belonging to Mr. Jameson. Box everything. He will be allowed supervised access tomorrow at 9 to collect them from storage. Also, the office of Chloe Renfrew in the marketing wing is to be cleared immediately. All items to be boxed and held. Change the keycard access for this floor and her department floor by end of day. Yes, ma'am. He didn't question. He just began making notes. At 10, I stood before the assembled staff in the glass-walled conference room. A sea of anxious, curious faces. I saw the senior VP's James's inner circle looking skeptical, even hostile. Good morning. For those who don't know me, I am Alberta Jameson. As of last night, I am the majority shareholder and interim CEO of this company. This change was necessitated by serious breaches of fiduciary duty and corporate governance by the former CEO. My first priority is stability. Your jobs are secure. Our clients are secure. My second priority is transparency. An independent audit of all departments will begin next week. My door is open. Thank you for your dedication during this transition. It was short. It was blunt. The silence that followed was thick. Then the CFO, a man named David, who had been James's golf buddy, stood up. With all due respect, Alberta, this is highly irregular. James built this place. The board, I interrupted, my voice cool, was apprised and is in full support. The shareholder agreement giving me controlling interest was signed before this company had its first client. My authority is not up for debate, David. Your department's Q2 projections, however, are. I expect the revised figures without the inflated revenue assumptions from the Delta account on my desk by noon. He sat down stunned. The room understood the new language. It was the language of numbers, of facts, of power they hadn't known existed. The days blurred into a grueling rhythm. I met with department heads. I pored over contracts. With Eleanor's help, I hired a forensic accounting firm. What they found was worse than I feared. Ghost vendors duplicate payments, excessive business development accounts used for personal travel, and a series of generous bonuses and questionable vendor contracts linked to Chloe's orbit. James's lawyer finally made contact. His demand was staggering: a $20 million severance, full vesting of all stock options, and continued use of the company jet. Eleanor's response was a single email attaching a dossier of the preliminary forensic findings with certain transactions highlighted in yellow. The subject line was potential criminal referral, discussion points. The next email from James's lawyer was markedly different. They would accept a standard severance per his employment contract and waive all stock claims. We agreed. He was gone. I heard through the grapevine he'd moved to a rental apartment. The word in the business community was brutal. The man who had been all flash and charm was now a cautionary tale about hubris. One evening after a 14-hour day, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of what was now my office. The city glittered a circuit board of possibilities. The fear was gone. In its place was a profound fatigue, and beneath that a solid, unshakable sense of rightness. This was my desk. This was my view. And for the first time, the weight on my shoulders felt like my own, not one I was carrying for someone else. The emails from Chloe started a week later. The first was bravado. You might have the company, but I have his child. The press will love this story. The second was panic. He left me. He's saying the baby might not be his. I have nothing. I didn't respond. Eleanor sent a cease and desist along with a summary of the misappropriated funds we had traced to her over $200,000 in bogus bonuses and padded invoices. The message was clear: we would not pursue criminal action if she signed an NDA and disappeared. Then she asked for a meeting, just us, woman to woman. Against my better judgment, and on Eleanor's advice that it could bring finality, I agreed. A public cafe midday. She was a ghost of the polished woman from my dining room. No makeup, her hair in a messy bun, wearing a simple maternity dress. The defiance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed fear. He promised me everything, she said, her voice flat. He said you were a relic, that you lived in the past and didn't understand his vision. He said once the baby came, he'd file for divorce and put me in a vice president role. He said the company was his to do with as he pleased. I listened, sipping my water. Her words should have hurt, but they just felt dusty, like hearing a story about someone I used to know. He needed you to feel younger, I said, not unkindly, and he needed me to be the stable, boring foundation so he could play the genius. You were both tools for his narrative. She flinched. I lost my job. My apartment lease is up. My family won't speak to me. I don't know what to do. The child is innocent. I repeated the line I had practiced. I will not pursue you for the funds if you sign the agreement and walk away. But you will get nothing more from me or from what was mine. You have to build your own life now, a real one, not one handed to you by a man who lies. She signed the NDA right there at the cafe table, her hand shaking. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused. He never respected you, you know. He laughed about you, called you the accountant behind your back, said you had no spark. I finally smiled, a small, genuine thing. Thank you, Chloe, for finally telling me the truth. Now, I don't have to waste a single second wondering if I made the right choice. Driving home, I felt an unexpected lightness. The final anchor of anger and resentment I had towards her slipped away. She wasn't a villain. She was a casualty of the same man's deceit, just a younger, more naive version of the woman I had been willing to trade my own light for his reflection. I rolled down the window and let the cool air wash over me. The chapter with James with Chloe was closed, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a pen on a legal document. I put the house on the market that week. It sold in days to a tech executive with a bright, noisy family. It was time. I found a penthouse loft overlooking the park. It was all light and space and empty walls, a place to start fresh. The first year was a lesson in reinvention. At work, I replaced the last of James's sycophants with talented, often overlooked people from within the company, a sharp woman from logistics who had ideas about supply chain AI, a young data analyst who had been ignored for years. Profitability, after an initial dip, began to climb. The culture shifted from one of showmanship to one of substance. It was quieter, but it worked. Lucas decided to join the company not as a favored heir, but as a junior project manager in the new sustainability division. We had dinner every Thursday, just the two of us. My daughter Maya, a ceramicist in Santa Fe, flew in and stayed for a month. We talked for hours about art, about life, about the kind of woman her grandmother was, the one whose ring I wore. I felt I was meeting my children again as an adult, and they were meeting me. I started saying yes to things. A book club with some women from the museum board, piano lessons relearning Chopin pieces I'd abandoned as a girl. I took a solo trip to Tuscany and spent a week doing nothing but eating, reading, and walking through olive groves. The solitude was no longer loneliness. It was a luxurious conversation with myself. I heard snippets about James. He tried to start a consulting firm, but his reputation preceded him. The last I heard, he was working in a mid-level management role for a former competitor, a humbling come-down. Chloe had the baby, a girl. She moved back to her hometown in the Midwest. I wished her no ill will. Their lives were their own. At the annual shareholders meeting, I stood at the podium, no longer interim, but officially elected chairman and CEO. I presented the year's results: solid, honest growth. I outlined a vision for ethical expansion. The applause was genuine. After an older investor shook my hand, "Your father would be proud," he said. "You've steadied the ship." I smiled. Not just steadied it, I thought. I finally discovered I was the ocean it sailed on. My new loft is filled with my own choices. Bold art from local galleries, shelves overflowing with books, a beautiful neglected piano I'm slowly befriending. One evening, I sat on my terrace with a cup of herbal tea, the city's skyline twinkling in the distance, the quiet rustle of the park below. I looked at my grandmother's ring, catching the last of the sunset. It no longer symbolized patient waiting. It symbolized a legacy of resilience that had passed to me and which I had finally learned to wield. The healing didn't come from winning. It came from waking up each morning in a life that was authentically, undeniably mine. The pain of betrayal became a scar, a reminder, but not an open wound. It came from the respect in my son's eyes, from the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved at work, from the peace of my own company. I learned that the greatest betrayal is not always the affair. It's the slow, steady erasure of your contribution. It's the assumption that your quiet strength is a weakness to be exploited. And I learned that the most powerful response is not a dramatic, fiery revenge. It's to live so fully, so authentically in the truth of your own power that the people who wronged you become footnotes in your story, not the central theme. I don't know what the future holds for James or Chloe. Not really. And I realized that is the entire point. Their story was a painful, necessary chapter that forced the book closed. But my book is still being written, and the pen is firmly in my hand. People ask me if I'm angry. I was, deeply. But now I'm just here, in my home with my tea, my books, and the quiet hum of a city that holds no more secrets from me. And sometimes in this new chosen quiet, I can almost hear my grandmother's voice, steady and clear. "It was always yours, Bertie. You just had to remember." So I want to ask you something. What in your life have you quietly given away thinking it was for love or peace that you might need to remember is yours? Is it a dream, your voice, your credit, your power? Take a moment and think about it. Then, if this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your thought in the comments below. Tell me what's one thing you're reclaiming for yourself. Your stories inspire me. If this tale of quiet strength found its way to you, please hit the like button. It lets me know these conversations matter. And if you're not yet subscribed, I invite you to join this community. We share stories of finding our footing, of turning pain into purpose right here. Hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the next chapter of resilience. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for remembering your own strength. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and steadfast in your truth. Goodbye.